The challenge begins. The battlefield was quiet, too quiet. Smoke rose from the burning wreckage of fallen ships, and the scent of metal and fire filled the air. Dead bodies, human and alien, lay scattered across the ground. The war between the United Earth Federation and the Auxiliary Empire had raged for years, but today, something was different. A figure stood in the middle of the battlefield, tall and deadly. She was not human. Her silver armor gleamed under the red sun, and her golden eyes glowed with an eerie light. A long, curved blade rested in her hand, sharp enough to slice through steel. She was Kyra, the Huntress, the deadliest warrior of the auxiliary race. Her name was feared across the galaxy. She had never lost a fight. Her enemies called her a demon, a ghost, an unstoppable predator. And now she had come with a challenge. A group of human soldiers watched her from a distance, gripping their weapons tightly. They had fought the auxiliary before, but none had ever seen her in battle. They whispered among themselves, fear in their voices. Then she spoke. Her voice was calm, but powerful. "Humans," she said, scanning the soldiers with her glowing eyes. "I have come for a challenge." The soldiers looked at each other, confused. "I will fight one of you," Kyra continued. "If you defeat me, I will be yours, a prize to claim." She paused, tilting her head slightly. "But if you lose, I will hunt you, one by one, until there is nothing left." A deep silence followed her words. No one moved. No one spoke. The idea of winning her as a prize was strange, but the fear of losing to her was real. Every soldier had heard the stories, how she had torn through enemy lines, how she had fought against entire squads alone, and walked away without a scratch. No human could match her. Or so they thought. "Fine, I'll fight you." A voice broke the silence. The soldiers turned, surprised. A man stepped forward. His uniform was torn, his face smeared with dirt and blood, but his eyes were steady. Captain Ryan Carter. He was a survivor, a fighter, a man who had never backed down from a challenge. He had fought in this war for years, seen his friends die, watched entire cities fall. But he had also seen something else, opportunities where others saw only fear. Zyra studied him, a hint of amusement flashing in her golden eyes. "You," she said. "Interesting." Ryan smirked. "Someone has to stop you." The soldiers around him whispered nervously. They knew Ryan was skilled, but this was Kyra. He was human. She was something else, faster, stronger, deadlier. "Very well," Kyra said. She raised her blade and pointed it at him. "We fight now." Ryan took a deep breath. He had no illusions. This was not a fair fight. He had watched the auxiliary in combat before. They were built for war. Their reflexes were faster, their bones denser, their muscles stronger. If he fought her head-on, he would die. So he wouldn't fight head-on. He pulled out his combat knife. It was small compared to her weapon, but it wasn't about the size of the blade. It was about how you used it. "Begin," Zyra said. Then she moved. She was fast, too fast. Before Ryan could react, she was already in front of him. Her blade slashed through the air, aiming for his throat. He barely dodged, rolling to the side as the ground where he stood a second ago was sliced open. She smiled. Slow. Ryan didn't respond. He kept moving, trying to stay out of her range. But she was playing with him. Every attack came close, too close. She was testing him, studying him. She wanted to see what he could do before she ended it. He needed a plan. Zyra lunged again. This time, Ryan didn't dodge completely. He let her blade graze his arm. Pain shot through him, but he ignored it. She smirked. "You are weak, human." "Maybe," Ryan said, gritting his teeth, "but I'm not dead yet." Then he struck. Using his speed, he twisted around her, driving his knife toward her side. But she was faster. Her arm shot up, grabbing his wrist in midair. With a flick of her wrist, She flipped him onto the ground, slamming him hard. He gasped for breath, pain shooting through his back. Zyra placed her foot on his chest, pressing down just enough to remind him who was stronger. "You lose," she said simply. The soldiers watching from a distance fell silent. It was over. But then, Zyra did something unexpected. She removed her foot and stepped back. She didn't kill him. She didn't even hurt him further. "Interesting," she said, watching Ryan as he coughed and sat up. "You are not like the others. You are not afraid." Ryan wiped blood from his mouth and looked up at her. "Was that the fight, or are you just getting started?" She chuckled, a rare sound from Auxiliary. "You amuse me, human, but you are not worthy. Not yet." She turned, walking away. "But I will give you a chance," she added. "Train. Prepare. And when you are ready, fight me again." With that, she disappeared into the shadows, leaving Ryan lying on the ground. The soldiers rushed to his side, whispering in shock. He had lost, but somehow he had also won something else, because now he had a second chance, and Ryan Carter was not the kind of man to waste it. The first encounter. The silence of the battlefield lingered long after Zyra had disappeared. The soldiers stood frozen, their minds struggling to process what had just happened. Auxiliary Huntress had offered herself as a prize, had fought a human, and instead of killing him, she had spared him. It was unheard of. Ryan Carter sat on a makeshift crate inside the damaged human outpost, his arm bandaged but still aching. His thoughts replayed the fight over and over. He had been too slow, too weak. Zyra had humiliated him. And yet, she had spared him. Why? A tall man with sharp features and an officer's uniform stepped forward. Commander Briggs. His expression was unreadable, but his tone was sharp. "You had no right to take that challenge, Carter." Ryan smirked, adjusting the bandage on his arm. Didn't see anyone else volunteering. Briggs exhaled, pacing. "You don't understand. You lost, but she let you live. That doesn't happen with Auxiliary. They fight to kill, always." Ryan looked up, his expression serious now. "Then why didn't she?" Briggs had no answer. Ryan stood, wincing as pain flared through his body. "She wants something," he muttered. "She said I wasn't worthy yet. That means she wants me to become worthy." Briggs frowned. "And what happens when you do?" Ryan thought about it. Zyra's golden eyes, sharp and amused. Her voice, calm but commanding. "When I do," he rolled his shoulders, "I'm going to beat her." The Watcher in the shadows, across the battlefield, high on a rocky ledge. Zyra crouched in the darkness, watching the human outpost. She had left the fight, but she had not left Ryan Carter. He intrigued her. Auxiliary warriors were trained to be the perfect hunters. Strength, speed, precision. These were the laws of battle. Humans were weaker, slower, and yet they were unpredictable. She had seen it in Ryan. His eyes held something different, something she had not seen in any opponent before. Defiance. He had known he would lose. And yet, he had still fought. And more than that, he had tried to outthink her, using misdirection and strategy. Zyra touched the small wound on her arm. A minor scratch. Barely a wound at all. But it was the first time a human had ever touched her in battle. She had spared him because she wanted to see if he could become more. She had given him time. But soon, she would return. And next time, he would have no excuse. The training begins. Ryan stood on a barren field outside the human base, sweat dripping from his face. The sun was rising, casting long shadows. He wasn't alone. A combat instructor, an older soldier named Vargas, circled him like a predator. "You're too slow," Vargas barked. "You think Auxiliary will wait for you to catch up." Again. Ryan raised his knife, but before he could react, Vargas struck, a sharp kick to the ribs, knocking him backward. Pain exploded through Ryan's body. He coughed, rolling onto his hands and knees. But he didn't stop. He got back up. Again and again. Days turned into weeks. His body ached. His reflexes sharpened. He studied every recording of Silari combat, analyzing their movement, their patterns. He trained in zero-gravity combat, learning to control his motion in unpredictable ways. He sharpened his instincts, focusing on speed instead of brute strength. One night, after hours of brutal training, Vargas threw him to the ground again. "Enough," the old soldier said. "I don't know if you can beat her, but you're not the same man she fought before." Ryan, breathing heavily, grinned through the pain. "Good. The rematch approaches." Thyra watched from the distance. She had not interfered, but she had been watching. She saw the way he moved now. Faster, more precise. He was still weaker than her, but something had changed. She could feel it. Her golden eyes gleamed in the darkness. It's time. The next fight would decide everything. Training for the impossible. The wind howled across the barren training grounds, carrying the scent of metal and sweat. Ryan Carter stood shirtless under the red sky, his muscles aching from hours of relentless drills. His bruises had bruises. His knuckles were raw. But his mind was sharper than ever. It had been weeks since his humiliating defeat against Syra, the Huntress. Weeks of pushing his body beyond its limits. Weeks of preparing for the rematch of a lifetime. He was no longer just a soldier. He was a man with a purpose. And his purpose was to defeat an alien warrior who had never lost a fight. The plan. Strength is not enough. Ryan wasn't stupid. He knew brute force wouldn't win this fight. Silari were stronger, faster, and biologically superior. If he faced Syra head-on, he would die. Simple as that. So he did what humans did best. He adapted. Vargas, his combat instructor, paced in front of him, arms crossed. His sharp eyes studied Ryan's stance. "You can't fight her like a soldier," Vargas said. "You have to fight her like a predator. She's not used to being the hunted." Ryan wiped sweat from his brow. "You're saying I need to fight dirty?" Vargas smirked. "I'm saying you need to fight smart. The auxiliary fight with precision, instinct. But you," he jabbed a finger at Ryan's chest, "you fight with unpredictability. That's your advantage." Ryan exhaled. Unpredictability. He needed to break her rhythm, disrupt her instincts, force her into unknown territory. He needed to turn her own strengths against her. The deadliest training. Zero-gravity combat drills. Ryan floated inside a rotating training chamber, pushing his body off the walls in random directions. In zero-G, his weight didn't matter. Speed and control did. A sparring drone launched toward him, its energy blades slashing through the air. Ryan twisted midair, using the force of the drone's attack to spin himself into a counter-strike. His knife cut through the drone's weak spot, and it exploded into sparks. Vargas watched from the side, nodding. Better, but still too predictable. Again. Blindfolded reflex training. Ryan stood in the middle of the arena, a blindfold wrapped tightly around his eyes. He could hear the faint whirring of training droids circling him. Their movements were random, impossible to predict visually. He closed his eyes and focused, listening, feeling. A sudden rush of air. Left. He ducked just as a drone's blade slashed over his head. He spun, sweeping his leg low and knocking another drone off balance. No sight, just instinct. If he wanted to beat Syra, he needed to feel the fight before it happened. Trapping a predator. The Silari relied on superior speed and reaction time. But what if Ryan could make that speed work against Syra? He trained using momentum traps, forcing enemies to move too fast to stop themselves. In one drill, Vargas charged at him, a combat knife in hand. Instead of dodging, Ryan stepped into the attack at the last second, using his opponent's speed to redirect the force. Vargas went tumbling forward. He got up grinning. "Now you're thinking like a hunter." The mind game. Physical training was only part of the battle. If Ryan wanted to win, he had to get inside Syra's head. He replayed their first fight in his mind. She was confident, but not arrogant. She was testing him, studying him. That meant she had curiosity, a weakness in a warrior who relied on instinct. She wanted to understand him, so he would become someone she couldn't understand. The message. Late one night, under the cover of darkness, Ryan sent a message through the auxiliary communication channels. A direct transmission meant only for Xyra. A simple message. I am ready. And then, a challenge. But are you? The Huntress returns. 3 nights later, the skies above the human outpost burned with blue flames as a single auxiliary starfighter descended from orbit. The soldiers scrambled to battle positions, fearing an attack. But Ryan stood at the center of the base, calm, waiting. The ship landed, steam hissing from its vents. The ramp lowered. Xyra stepped out. She was dressed in sleek black combat armor this time, her golden eyes glowing with amusement. "You call for me, human," she said, voice smooth like a blade. "Brave or foolish?" Ryan smirked. "You said I wasn't worthy. Let's find out if I am now." Xyra studied him, tilting her head. "I expected fear in your eyes. I see none." Ryan shrugged. "Fear is for the weak." Xyra's lips curled into something close to a smile. "Good." She drew her blade, its edge humming with energy. "Then let's finish what we started." Ryan tightened his grip on his knife. This time, he was ready. This time, he wasn't just fighting to survive. He was fighting to win. The rematch had begun. The rematch, a new strategy. The air between them was thick with tension. The soldiers who had gathered to watch the confrontation stood in silence, their eyes fixed on the 2 warriors, Ryan Carter and Xyra. Human versus Xyra. It was no longer just a fight. It was a test, a battle between 2 species, 2 philosophies, 2 ways of war. Xyra's golden eyes gleamed as she circled him, her curved blade held effortlessly in her grip. She looked like a predator toying with its prey, waiting to see what it would do. But this time, Ryan wasn't prey. He had trained for this. He had blood for this. And he wouldn't lose again. The first strike. Without warning, Xyra moved. Fast. Ryan barely had time to react as she closed the distance in a blur, her blade slicing toward his throat. But this time, he was ready. Instead of dodging backward, like he did last time, he lunged forward at the last second, moving into her attack instead of away from it. Her eyes flashed in surprise. Her blade passed just inches from his face, but it missed. Ryan twisted his body and slashed with his knife, aiming for her ribs. But she was fast, too fast. She spun away, avoiding the strike. But for the first time, she had been forced to retreat. A murmur spread through the watching soldiers. Ryan Carter was not the same man who had lost before. Breaking her rhythm. Xyra paused, analyzing him. She didn't charge immediately like last time. She was cautious now. That meant Ryan's plan was working. Xyra warriors were instinctive fighters. Their bodies reacted faster than their minds, their reflexes superior to humans. They relied on predictable responses, an enemy dodging backward, flinching, freezing up. But Ryan wasn't playing by their rules. He wasn't reacting like prey. He was acting like a predator. Xyra's lips curled slightly. Interesting. Then she vanished again. She was on him in a second, striking from above this time, her blade arcing down toward his shoulder. Ryan didn't try to block it. Instead, he threw himself sideways, rolling with her momentum instead of against it. As she landed, she expected him to be off balance. That was her mistake. He was already moving. His knife slashed toward her side, the same place where he had grazed her in their first fight. It was a test. Would she dodge the same way? She did. And that's when he struck for real. A sharp feint, and then his real attack came from the opposite side. This time, his blade connected. It was a small cut, just below her ribs. Not deep, not deadly. But it was enough. Zyra leaped back, placing a hand on her side. She looked down at the thin line of blood on her fingertips. Silence. No one had ever drawn blood from her before. A dangerous smile. Ryan took a slow breath. He wasn't winning yet. He had just proven he could hurt her. And now he had her full attention. Zyra stared at the wound for a moment. Then she did something unexpected. She laughed. It was low, quiet, but filled with something new. Excitement. Amusement. "You're learning," she said, licking the blood from her fingers. Her golden eyes burned brighter now. "Good. I was afraid this would be too easy." Ryan tightened his grip on his knife. His heartbeat pounded in his ears. He had expected anger. Rage. Not this. She wanted this. She had been waiting for a fight that challenged her, and now she had one. The real fight begins. Zyra no longer held back. She came at him with everything. Her strikes were sharper, faster, more unpredictable. She was adapting, countering his strategy. But so was he. They moved like shadows across the battlefield, their weapons clashing in a deadly dance. The soldiers could barely keep up with their speed. Sparks flew as blades met. The sound of their movements echoed in the cold air. One wrong move could mean death. Ryan knew he couldn't last forever. His stamina was limited compared to hers. If this dragged out too long, she would outlast him. He needed to end it. The final gambit. Zyra lunged, her deadliest attack yet. She aimed for his chest, going for a direct killing blow. But Ryan had already planned for this. At the last second, instead of dodging, he stepped into the attack. The watching soldiers gasped. But Ryan wasn't suicidal. As her blade rushed toward him, he twisted his body at the last possible moment. Her weapon slashed past his side, drawing blood, but missing anything vital. And in that split second, he grabbed her wrist. With all his strength, he used her own momentum against her. He flipped her. For the first time in her life, Zyra hit the ground. The battlefield fell silent. Victory. Ryan stood over her, panting, blood dripping from his wound. His knife was inches from her throat. He had won. Or had he? Zyra looked up at him, her golden eyes wide, not with anger, not with humiliation, but with something else. Admiration. She exhaled a slow breath. "You are worthy now." She closed her eyes. She accepted defeat. The soldiers watching were stunned. No one knew what would happen next. But Ryan did, because he had just realized. This had never been about victory. This had been about earning her respect. And now, the deadliest warrior in the galaxy was his. The final fight, all or nothing. The dust had barely settled, yet the weight of what had just happened hung thick in the air. Ryan Carter stood over Zyra, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. His knife hovered inches from her throat. His muscles screamed from exhaustion. His side burned from the wound she had given him. But he had won. Or so it seemed. Zyra, the untouchable, undefeated warrior of the Xilari, lay beneath him. But her golden eyes did not hold anger, nor fear. They held something far more dangerous. Amusement. She exhaled slowly, her lips curling into the smallest of smirks. "You are worthy now," she whispered. Then, in a move so fast Ryan barely registered it, she swept his legs from under him. He crashed onto his back, the impact knocking the air from his lungs. His knife went flying. Zyra was instantly on top of him, pinning him down, her blade pressed against his throat. The soldiers watching gasped. 1 second, Ryan had won. The next, he was at her mercy. Zyra's face was inches from his, her golden eyes burning into him. "Did you think it was that easy, human?" she murmured. Ryan swallowed. He wasn't afraid. He was too tired for fear. But what came next? Would she kill him? Would she call off her offer? Had he come all this way, fought so hard, only to fail at the last moment? Then, to his shock, Syra let out a low, throaty chuckle. She pulled back, spinning her blade once before sheathing it. "It is done," she announced, standing. The battlefield fell into stunned silence. Ryan blinked up at her. "Wait. What?" Syra looked down at him, tilting her head slightly. "I did not say I would surrender. I said you must prove yourself. You have done that." Ryan sat up slowly, still catching his breath. "So, you're saying?" Syra crossed her arms, a glint of something unreadable in her gaze. "You have earned me. I am your prize, as promised." The watching soldiers whispered in shock. The undefeated Huntress of the Xilari had just declared herself his. A prize or a partner? Ryan got to his feet, shaking his head. He wiped the blood from his side. "I don't want a prize. That's not why I fought you." Syra's expression flickered with something new. "Oh." He met her gaze, unflinching. "I wanted to prove that humans aren't weak, that we can stand as equals." Syra studied him for a long moment. "You are an unusual human, Ryan Carter." Ryan smirked. "I get that a lot." The Xilari warrior let out a low hum. "Then you do not wish to claim me." Ryan thought for a moment. He had trained for weeks, bled, suffered, and risked his life to win this fight. And now, after all that, she was willing to follow him. Not as a slave, not as a trophy, but as something far more powerful. An ally. "No," he said finally. "I don't want to claim you. I want you to fight beside me." The murmurs of the soldiers grew louder. Was Ryan rejecting the most dangerous warrior in the galaxy? But Syra didn't seem insulted. If anything, she seemed intrigued. "You fight for something greater than yourself," she said. "That is rare." Then she took a step closer, lowering her voice. "But tell me, Ryan Carter, if I am not your prize, then what am I?" Ryan held her gaze, unshaken. "A warrior, a leader, a force to be reckoned with." Syra smirked, baring sharp canines. "Correct answer." She turned, looking at the stunned humans around them. "Then I will fight with you, human. Let us see how far you can push me." Xilari versus Xilari. Syra's decision sent ripples across the galaxy. The Xilari warrior, one of the deadliest in existence, now fought alongside a human. Her people saw it as betrayal. Her leaders saw it as a challenge. And soon, the Xilari High Command sent a message across the stars. Syra has abandoned the hunt. She is no longer Xilari. She is a traitor, and all traitors must be hunted. Syra read the message, her golden eyes narrowing. Ryan stood beside her. "Looks like you just pissed off your whole species." Syra smirked. "Good." She turned to him, her voice filled with something new. "Let them come. Now, the real fight begins. The prize or the partner?" The weight of Syra's declaration still hung in the air. Ryan Carter, bruised and bloody but victorious, watched as the Xilari Huntress stood before him. Not as an enemy, not as a conquered prize, but as something far more dangerous. A willing ally. Around them, the human soldiers whispered in disbelief. Some were uneasy. Some were excited. And some, Ryan could tell, did not trust her at all. "Sir, this is madness," one of the officers whispered to Commander Briggs. "She's a Xilari. You really expect us to fight alongside one of them?" Briggs didn't respond. He was watching Ryan, waiting to see what the young captain would do. Ryan exhaled. His body ached, his wounds stung, but his mind was sharper than ever. He turned to Syra. "If you're with us, you follow our rules." Syra raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "Rules?" Ryan nodded. "No killing unless necessary. No hunting my people for sport. And definitely no treating humans like prey." Syra tilted her head, as if considering the terms. "Agreed," she said finally. "On one condition." Ryan folded his arms. "Let me guess, no treating you like a prize." Syra let out a rare, sharp laugh. You learn quickly, human. Ryan smirked. It's what we do best. But before he could say more, the alarm sirens blared across the human outpost. An urgent message flashed across the holoscreen. Incoming Tyrannisation. XELARI High Command. The screen crackled with static. Then an auxiliary warlord appeared. His face was lined with scars, his piercing red eyes burning with fury. His voice, deep and commanding, echoed across the base. Thera, Huntress of the Void, you have broken the sacred code. You have turned against your own. You have sided with prey. The soldiers stiffened. Thera did not react. She simply stared at the screen, her expression unreadable. The warlord continued. You are no longer auxiliary. You are cast out, a traitor, and all traitors must be hunted. The screen went black. Then another alarm blared. Multiple hostile ships, DTKTE. Ryan cursed. That was fast. Zira turned to him, her golden eyes glowing with something that looked a lot like excitement. They come for me, she said. Let them come. The first test of loyalty. The auxiliary warships descended like shadows, their sleek black hulls cutting through the sky. The base's defense cannons roared to life, firing up at the incoming threat. The human soldiers scrambled, weapons ready. Ryan grabbed his rifle and turned to Syra. This is your last chance. Walk away now, and they might let you live. Syra gave him a sharp look. You do not understand, Ryan Carter. There is no walking away. She drew her blade, its silver edge humming with deadly energy. I fight beside you now, she said. Let us see if your people can keep up. The battle for survival. The first wave of auxiliary warriors landed on the battlefield. They moved like shadows, fast, precise, merciless. The human soldiers opened fire. Bullets and plasma rounds tore through the air, but the auxiliary dodged and weaved through the attacks, closing in fast. Ryan stood at the front lines, firing shot after shot, his mind working fast. This isn't working, he muttered. We need a different strategy. Then he saw her, already in motion. She moved like a phantom, weaving between attacks with inhuman speed. Her blade flashed in the light, cutting down her own kind without hesitation. For a brief second, the battlefield paused. Even the auxiliary warriors hesitated, seeing their former champion fighting against them. One of them, auxiliary captain, snarled in disbelief. You betray your own blood. Zara did not answer. She lunged, her blade piercing his chest before he could react. She spun, slicing through another attacker, her movements like a deadly dance. For the first time in history, auxiliary was fighting for humanity. And auxiliary did not know how to handle it. Turning the tide. Ryan saw the hesitation among the enemy forces. He grabbed the nearest soldier. Tell the snipers, focus fire on anyone hesitating. Break their morale. The soldier nodded and relayed the orders. Within moments, the battle shifted. The auxiliary, who had always been the hunters, were now the hunted. One by one, they began to fall. Then, as quickly as it had begun, the remaining auxiliary warriors retreated. Their ships lifted off, disappearing into the sky. The battle was over. For now, aftermath. A new reality. The battlefield was littered with bodies, smoke rising from the wreckage. The human soldiers stared at Syra, their faces filled with both awe and fear. Commander Briggs stepped forward, his expression unreadable. You killed your own kind. Zira sheathed her blade. They are no longer my kind. Briggs studied her. Then he turned to Ryan. You took a big risk trusting her. Ryan wiped blood from his face and smirked. Worked out, didn't it? Briggs sighed. For now. But this is bigger than you, Carter. You think the auxiliary will stop with one failed attack. Zyra's voice was calm but firm. No, they will not stop. They will send more. They will send stronger. Briggs exhaled. Then we need to prepare. He turned to the soldiers. Get the wounded inside. Secure the base. And someone get me an intelligence report on auxiliary troop movements. As the soldiers moved, Ryan turned back to Zyra. That was one hell of a first day as an ally. Zyra smirked. You humans do not bore me. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. But tell me, Ryan Carter, if you had lost, would you have fought for me as I now fight for you? Ryan met her gaze, unflinching. Yes. Zyra studied him for a long moment. Then, for the first time since they met, she offered a small, genuine nod of respect. Then let us see if we can survive what comes next. Because they both knew this war was far from over. And soon, the auxiliary empire would come for both of them. The legend begins. The silence after the battle was eerie. The smoke still hung in the air, the metallic scent of blood and burnt circuits filling the battlefield. The ground was littered with the bodies of fallen warriors, human and Silari alike. But there was no time to mourn. Ryan Carter stood at the heart of it all, gripping his rifle as his chest rose and fell with heavy breaths. His body ached, his wounds burned, but his mind was already racing ahead. The auxiliary had retreated, for now, but they would be back. And next time, they wouldn't just send warriors. They'd send an army, a foe too great. Inside the command center, the war table flickered with holograms of Silari fleet movements. The numbers were terrifying. The Silari Empire was mobilizing. Hundreds of warships, thousands of soldiers. Commander Briggs rubbed his temples. This isn't just about Zyra anymore, he muttered. They aren't just hunting her. They're coming for all of us. Ryan tightened his jaw. Then we make our stand. Briggs shot him a sharp look. We don't have the resources for that kind of fight, Carter. Ryan met his gaze, unshaken. We don't need to beat them. We just need to survive them long enough to change the rules. Zyra's warning. Zyra stood at the edge of the room, silent but watchful. She had expected this. She had felt it the moment she chose to stand with humanity. The Xelari were not just coming to kill her. They were coming to erase her choice from existence. In their eyes, she was proof that humans were more than prey. And that was unacceptable. She turned to Ryan, her golden eyes calculating. We cannot fight them in open battle. Not yet. But we can do what you humans do best. Ryan arched an eyebrow. And what's that? Zyra smirked. The unpredictable. The birth of the resistance. That night, the base was alive with movement. Plans were drawn. Supplies were gathered. Soldiers whispered of the impossible war ahead. But something was different. For the first time since the war began, hope stirred among the ranks. They had Zyra, the greatest warrior of the Xelari, the undefeated Huntress. The legend of 100 battlefields now fought for them. That meant something. It meant that the Xelari could be defied. Striking first. Instead of waiting for the Xelari to attack, Ryan proposed something insane. A preemptive strike. Briggs nearly had a stroke when he heard it. You want to attack them? Ryan nodded. They expect us to hide. To be weak. We need to hit them first. Show them that humans aren't prey. Zyra crossed her arms. A bold move, but not a foolish one. Briggs sighed. What's the target? Ryan grinned. Their command relay. If we take that out, they lose coordination. It'll buy us time to prepare for the real war. The mission. Infiltration. The plan was simple but insane. A small team. A stealth drop behind enemy lines. Get in, plant the charges, and get out before the Xelari knew what hit them. Ryan, of course, volunteered. And Zyra, naturally, wouldn't let him go alone. You still owe me a real fight, Ryan Carter, she teased. I won't let you die before then. He smirked. Good to know you care. Zyra's eyes glowed in the dim light. I don't. I simply do not waste what is mine. Ryan chuckled. I'll take it. Behind enemy lines. The night sky was dark as their small transport ship slipped past auxiliary patrols. The auxiliary relay station loomed in the distance, a sleek black tower pulsing with alien energy. The team dropped silently onto the platform, moving with practiced efficiency. Zyra took the lead, her movements near invisible in the darkness. She took out the first guard in a blink, her blade whispering through the air. Ryan followed close behind, setting the charges along the structure's weak points. Everything was going smoothly, until the alarms blared. They had been spotted. Fighting in the shadows, auxiliary soldiers poured into the station, their sleek armor gleaming under the red warning lights. But Ryan and Zyra were already moving. They fought back to back, a seamless flow of human ingenuity and alien precision. Ryan's rifle lit up the corridors, dropping enemies before they could react. Zyra moved like a shadow, her blade cutting through armor as if it were air. They reached the final charge point, the detonation timer already counting down. Then, the real threat arrived. The hunter arrives. A new auxiliary warrior stepped into the corridor. Larger than Zyra, bulkier, covered in battle scars. His armor was black as the void, and his eyes burned like molten metal. He was not an ordinary warrior. He was a hunter-class auxiliary, elite, lethal, and he had one purpose. Zyra, he rumbled, his voice like rolling thunder. You shame our kind. Zyra stepped forward, blade in hand. I made my choice. Kairos. Kairos bared his fangs. Then I will unmake it. A fight worthy of legends. The battle was instant and violent. Kairos struck first, his strength inhuman, his speed rivaling even Zyra's. Their blades clashed, sparks flying. Ryan could barely keep up with their movements. He had fought Zyra before, but this was different. Kairos was not testing her. He was trying to end her. And Zyra. For the first time, Ryan saw her struggling. She was fast. She was skilled. But Kairos was stronger. Ryan gritted his teeth. He couldn't just watch. He raised his rifle. Bang! The shot struck Kairos in the shoulder. He staggered, just for a second. But a second was all Zyra needed. She lunged, driving her blade through his chest. Kairos gasped, his golden eyes flickering. You chose them over us. Zyra leaned in close. I chose myself. She twisted the blade. Kairos fell. The explosion. The relay station's timer hit 0. Boom. Fire and debris filled the sky as the team escaped to their ship. The mission was a success. The auxiliaries' network was crippled. Their fleet was blind. And the legend of Ryan Carter and Zyra, the Huntress turned warrior, was just beginning. The war is far from over. As they flew back to base, Zyra turned to Ryan. You are full of surprises, human. Ryan smirked. You haven't seen anything yet. She chuckled, shaking her head. Then let us see if you can survive what comes next. Because the war was far from over. And together, they were going to change the galaxy.